everyone. Welcome to April 2026's Authors Chat. This evening, we're sitting down to chat with a talented debut author who I met last May at Romancing New England's Rom-Com, who graciously agreed to come chat with us about their enemies to lovers romance single player. So, without further ado, to chat about how writing a novel about gaming turned into a romance, let's welcome Tara Tai.
Hello, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So, for anyone who's new here this evening, we have Megan acting as our moderator in the chat panel, and we do ask that everyone keep themselves on mute throughout the evening to aid in our recording quality. And then, if you have questions, submit them in the chat panel, and we're going to be checking in with Megan throughout the evening for her to ask your questions to Tara. And with that, let's get things started. Tara, we like to always kick things off with some icebreaker questions. These are just some fun things to warm up with as people are still joining and getting settled before we start talking about single player. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ozma for the first question.
Okay, so if you had to pick a favorite main character from any romance series to be your book girl or boyfriend, who would you choose?
Um, oh my gosh, that's really. Can you repeat the question
Oh,
because
sorry.
Zoom was
Oh, sorry.
changing the formatting a little bit, so I got a little distracted. No, no, not at all your fault. I have there's room for improvement for my multitasking skills.
So if you had to pick a favorite main character from any romance series to be your book girl or boyfriend, who would you choose?
Oh no, this is so hard. This is not an icebreaker. This is like an earth-shattering question. This is really, really challenging. Hmm. I really enjoyed A Lady for All Seasons just came out by TJ Alexander, and I really enjoyed all of the characters in that sort of like hist romance, trans Regency romance, book. But I particularly loved Flora and William's character, just in terms of like their her acceptance of all the multitudes they contain, and just like they're so funny and they're like such talent. They're like a very talented writer as well, and like able to like cross genres. I'm not spoiling too much of the book. It's fantastic. Go check it out. So I think that's like weirdly the first thing, not weirdly, but like this is not a question I've ever contemplated before, and that is the first thing, the first individual that popped into my head. So yeah, go check out A Lady for All Seasons by TJ Alexander.
Well, if it's the first thing that popped in your head, we're going to consider it the perfect answer. Um, and so we ask all of our visiting authors this one after the topic came up in one of our first guest books. Do you have a chocolate drawer?
Oh, I do. I have a candy box. I could actually get it right now if see if I feel like you guys are recording and this might not translate well, but I used to be a big fan of Doctor Who, and I have a TARDIS mug that currently it's empty, which is a good reflection of my mental state. But normally it would have candy in it and chocolate and all sorts of wonderful things.
Oh, someone after my own heart right there with that.
If you could have a meal with any author from the past, who would it be?
These are really heavy hitting questions. Toni Morrison, just what a brilliant writer. What a beautiful, just beautiful words, beautiful soul. I haven't even read so like that many of her books, but it's just so seminal. And uh, there are some books I crack into where I get angry because I'm like I'm I read, I read one line and I'm like, I am so not a talented writer when, I hold myself to this bar. I think Jessamine Ward is one of them. I'm reading her book Let Us Descend, which I think was published in 2023. Um, And Toni Morrison for me is like one of those authors.
So here's just a goofy fun one. If you were a shapeshifter, what would your animal form be?
What would it be, or what would I want it to be?
You could play it either way, whichever one you want to.
Okay, I would love to be some sort of creature that has the power of flight, just because, for obvious reasons. Great form of transportation, and would be a neat party trick. Enable me to get to work without risking life and limb on my bike in the busy streets of Boston. Um, I suspect I would be more like like a particularly social cat. Um, maybe like a Scottish fold or something. So like something that is still fundamentally introverted, as cats tend to be, but on the more social end of that spectrum.
So, okay, so apparently I'm giving the questions that are harder. If you had to be trapped in a house with five other authors, a hostage writer's retreat of sorts, who would you want to be trapped with?
Probably my writing friends. I have a group of writing friends here in Boston, and a little bit online that I play D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. It's a TTRPG, which is, I just said a lot of letters that may not mean anything. TTRPG stands for tabletop role playing game, and we also write. We met because of our writing, but then we became friends because we loved telling narrative stories, well, stories together via role playing games. So probably I have consigned myself to my doom in a hostage situation. So this is just purely who would I want to spend my last moments with, not who do I think would be beneficial for helping us get out of this particular scenario.
So, do you remember the first romance novel you read, or the one that kind of got you where you realized, oh, this is fun?
It's a really good question. I know Nicholas Sparks doesn't consider what he writes romance, but I did read a lot of his work growing up when, in like the 90s. Like A Walk to Remember. I think Message in a Bottle was like the book that I like first, like besides Old Yeller, which is an extremely problematic book now, but I read it in the 90s. I think Message in a Bottle was like the first book that made me cry. But again, I know that he doesn't consider his writing romance. I didn't really get back into the genre until I want to say 2021, which conveniently was the pandemic and sort of like shook up my reading habits a little bit. Like I read very broadly. I've always read very broadly, but I've historically sort of like canted towards literary fiction, a little bit of sci-fi fantasy, historical fiction, and then sort of during the pandemic, like a year in, I started like dipping into genre a little bit more, specifically like thrillers and then romance. I think it was another one of TJ Alexander's books. I think it was Chef's Kiss. Was the first book where I was like, oh, gay people are writing these. Mainly because like romance did not feel like it was fundamentally a genre for me. And like that didn't really bother me. I'm not like one of those people who are like, you know, lying awake at night thinking about how I'm like underrepresented. It's just like I just moved on. But Chef's Kiss was like the book where I was like, oh, gay people are reading this stuff, and like it's kind of cool. I think Meryl Wilsner's Something to Talk About was another book that my wife actually picked up at All She Wrote, which is sort of like women owned and run bookstore, indie bookstore here in Boston. That was another book that I was like, oh, there's room for gay people now. So I think those are the two books that reintroduced me to romance, and then I picked up like Ashley Herring Blake a little bit with like Delilah Green. Melinda Lowe wrote Telegraph last night at the Telegraph Club, which is not really romance. It's YA or middle grade. I'm not quite sure of the classification, but heavy romance plot. And I just like thought that was such a beautiful book with like the historical element. and with sort of like a queer Asian protagonist. And then Casey McQuiston's One Last Stop also had an Asian character in it, and was a queer romance. So like all of those books I inhaled, I want to say at the beginning of like 2021, late 2020. And it like for me was a wake up call of like, oh, the world is bad, and the world always feels bad. It feels particularly bad these days. But there are like snippets of like change and progress and hope, and like we would be remiss not to acknowledge and like hold on to those moments when they come across our timelines.
Okay. So kind of wanting to transition to what everyone came here to talk about, the book. And
You didn't come here to talk about my TARDIS mug?
I mean, we
Sorry.
can talk about it. I have friends who would definitely want to know all about it, including where you got it from. But want to warn everyone, anyone who hasn't read single player, we're going to be asking questions that are by default going to have us discussing major plot points and might include some spoilers. So you're going to be warned. But you've been quoted in past interviews as saying you were trying to write a love letter to gaming when you were writing single player. So, can you tell us about what drew you into wanting to write that love letter and how it ended up also becoming a romance novel?
Yes. As many things in retrospect, a lot of it had to do with the pandemic. During the pandemic, I read a lot of romance books. The number of genres I consistently read changed, as I've already mentioned. I also played a lot of video games. I've always played a good amount of video games, but obviously the pandemic enabled people to really sit at home and just play video games. And I think the confluence of those two things really got me thinking about how video games handle romance in oftentimes precisely the wrong ways, and reinforce ideas of how relationships and relationships are things that you can gamify, and people are machines that you can feed like love points and gifts into until affection falls out. So I think it was the confluence of those things, like just really going hard on my gaming hobby, and then rediscovering romance as a genre. I think like looking hindsight being 2020, and like being able to put a nice tidy bow on like the story around single player and how it came to be. I think there's also like there's a lot of shared facets between gaming and romance, in the sense that like both hobbies, romance readers and gamers, both of these like subcultures of people, are oftentimes maligned by society for their hobby, right? Like romance readers are seen as like unfairly, obviously seen as like a frivolous people who just like want pure, fluffy, escapist fantasy, and gamers are seen as like there's the one spectrum of like, oh, if you play games, you're probably violent and lonely. Um, and like you don't have social skills, and like I just wanted to rehabilitate that a little bit, by combining these two things, because like I think with my realization of like Chef's Kiss and like Meryl Wilsner's books, I was like, oh, this genre of book can be for anybody now, and it was always for anybody, but now the gatekeepers are maybe opening the gates a little wider, in the same way that I've always felt like gaming can be for anyone, because at a lot of games at their core are about storytelling, and like storytelling in a very engaged and sort of like active way, and like how can that only be for like lonely cis white men living in basements, right? Like that's for everyone. So yeah, that's probably the meta reason for wanting to combine these two things.
So in chapter 20 of the book, Kat discusses why she likes romance in games with Andy, and the subject of tropes is brought up in an interesting way, that games don't use them because they don't feel real. The conversation stood out to us because the book as a whole is so trope rich. do you have a favorite trope that you included in the book? And as a gamer, do you find that tropes are truly more rare in games?
No, I think there's actually even a line where Kat's like, yeah, I'm not sure that was entirely true, but Andy's not going to know the difference because they don't play games with romance in them. So no, it's not entirely true. I think games definitely, um, feature tropes very
Mhm.
heavily. I think my favorite trope, I don't know if I have a favorite trope. Slow burn, is that a trope? I
Yes.
don't know if slow burn is a trope. I was raised in the 90s where like, the best thing I had going for me was Xena. And like they don't kiss until like season 7. And even then it's like, oh, but they're friends. So like for me, and this is probably something I could examine. Um for me, like the longer the period of literary edging, the better, right? Like, I'm actually not super like I respect and I love reading spacey romances, but like they're probably not my like they're not like I'm not like, oh my god, this is like 6 stars and they're in the back seat of the car on page 7. Like that's like not the thing that sells a novel for me personally. I'm like, yeah, you could never get together. You could hold hands on page 365 and that could be as far as you get and that would be okay. So yeah, slow burn might be my favorite trope, and it's honestly reflected in single player. The first draft, they like did not kiss until like I think it was like page 250, and then both my agent and my editor were like, no, and I was like, but, and they were like, no, and I was like, okay.
So no one's going to believe we didn't give you these questions ahead of time because you're segueing to the next questions so perfectly. So you still left over 200 pages between Kat and Andy's not so meet cute in their first kiss. Um, I think it was about 208 pages I calculated. But to hold on, let me get back here. The single player is the definition of the ultimate slow burn. So, as a writer, how did you take on maintaining the tension between the two of them to sustain that slow burn and continue moving that plot forward?
Ooh, um, honestly, it's a reflection of how video games do things, right? Like it's so destructive, but the majority of video games, especially older video games that that, like haven't come out in the last 5 years, you don't boink until like right before the final mission, right? Like you spend like fully 90% of the video game being like, oh, we're going to this other planet that happens to have this particular off-world type of tea that this companion of mine likes, and I'm going to go on a long mission to like figure out how to buy this tea from this merchant for some reason who doesn't want to sell it to me, and then you like give the person you're trying to romance the tea. I'm totally making this up, by the way. This is not reflective of a real video game. And then like you get a little cutscene where they say thank you and they blush, and you're like, well, that was my payoff for that ridiculous side quest. On to the next thing. And then you play this game for like 90 hours, and on the 91st hour, right before the last mission, where like maybe you'll die depending on how you do on the last mission, they're like, I love you. So I think it was like me wanting to emulate that, because it's such a common trope, I guess, in video games. How did I maintain the tension? I think enemies to lovers lends itself well to tension, right? Like I actually think some of the other tropes are a lot harder, like friends to lovers or second chance, where like you like as a reader, that they have history and they have pre-established like chemistry. Like it's really hard for I think authors not to just fall back on miscommunication, because it's like you guys have boinked before. Like you've been, and not only that, you've been in like, especially second chance, you've been in a relationship before. So why haven't you talked about the fact that like, and like adults would talk about like, well emotionally regulated adults would talk about, be like, okay, this may not be a good idea because of X, Y, and Z, but like the emotions are making me feel like we should do A, B, and C, right? But that's like not super interesting for a book. But enemies to lovers is great because I can just be like, well, they still hate each other, and for reasons that they think they still hate each other, they can't possibly kiss yet. So
So, a large part of the drama of single player revolves around office, workplace dynamics, and politics. What drove that choice?
Um, I am not brave enough to quit my job and become a game dev. I wish I were. Being a game dev is just also so hard. You get paid so little, and you work for years creating a product that may not ever get launched. And if it does get launched, it's you're like subject to the whims of your corporate overlords. And also subject to an extremely critical audience. Like gamers, are extremely critical. I mean, like nowadays, everyone who consumes media is extremely critical, but I think gamers forged that path way back in the 2010s. They're chronically online. So this was a little bit of wish fulfillment for me. Just being able to explore my love for and respect for game devs. Like what they do is so hard without me personally going into that industry. I also there's an Apple TV show that was underrated for a very long time called Mythic Quest, which featured I mean I think Charlie Day was behind it, and I forget the name of the main guy, but like Ashley Birch and whatnot, that's like a workplace sitcom or like workplace comedy. It's not a romance, but watching that show also just made me feel like it'd be such a fun and like fresh setting. I think like a lot of romances are um uh like how do you make a workplace romance setting interesting and fresh, right? And how do you make it differentiated? And that for me was sort of the ticket. And then finally, I don't work in gaming, but I work in big tech, and I just felt like I could speak to like the tech environment a little bit. So yeah.
So, kind of going off of like the workplace a little bit more, how did you balance the power dynamics between Andy and Kat in their romance that resulted from their work situation? Did creating that balance impact the decisions you made on how to progress their romance and what their professional aspirations would be?
Yeah, that was really challenging because I've read like and I've seen a lot of toxic workplace romances, and I really wanted to avoid that. At the same time, like it's kind of impossible, especially in like a boss employee situation. So one of like the easy sleight of hand things I did was just to make Cat technically report to Philo, which is probably not what would actually happen in sort of like a normal org structure, right? Like if this were a healthy functioning company, which you know this company is not, there's no way Andy would hire this person without interviewing them or like knowing that they were about to be brought in. But my sort of like narrative sleight of hand was to make her report to Philo. I think that like the fact that it was a workplace romance also just made it easier to have it be slow burn because there were just like true obstacles to them like confessing their feelings to each other, and like made it like very reasonable why Andy was like, I can't kiss this person, that's insane, and I like my job, I would like to keep it even though my boss is an asshat. So yeah, that took a lot of like surgical precision of like the scenes of like how far do I edge them up against this like line without having either of them, but specifically Andy cross it.
So this is kind of just a specific for me question because it was kind of something that ticked in my head. Kat's character is one that practices masking a lot as a coping mechanism for navigating her relationships, and as just a person who was very active in a Greek adjacent organization in college. I found it very interesting you had her in a sorority and wondered about why you picked that for her. And I only found it unusual because I know the extreme amount of energy it would have consumed for her to have done that amount of work without being fully excited about it and fully like 100% behind it. Like reading it, I was like, I am so exhausted for her to think about the level of masking that it would have taken her to do this. So I was just curious about that choice.
I've never been in a Greek organization, and maybe that was a good thing because perhaps if I had been, I would have known that it's like too unrealistic to put on the page. But I chose it because I felt like it, like as writers, you're always show don't tell, sort of like the golden rule, and like for me that felt like a very clear shortcut to like explain to the reader without like explaining to the reader, right, that this is the type of person Kat is, and this is the lengths to which she will go in order to like appease her parents and like feel like she's fitting in and like have the right outfit so nobody calls her out on like whatever it is. So that was a very conscious choice. I do wonder if I had been part of a Greek organization in college, if I would have been like, yeah, like Kat is actually like she she masks a lot. At the same time, she's like not a doormat. Like she has actually a pretty strong sense of self, which was like intentional on my part. I like wanted her to have that duality. Um, and I wonder if I had been in a Greek organization in college or in school, if I would have been like, yeah, no, that's impossible to do. So you tell me, actually.
I mean, I wasn't in a sorority. Like I said, I was in an adjacent org,
Sure.
and like I just know they did even more work than I did. And I was fully gung ho for what I did, and it was exhausting being fully engaged in it. And there's no way I could have gone through 4 years of doing what they did. Unless you're like 100% into it, like you don't do it because it's intense. It's exhausting.
Yeah, yeah. I
So I
mean,
was like, that's a lot of masking. So I got the point that you were getting there, but I was like, oh my God, I'm exhausted for her.
yeah. I mean, that's how she turned out the way she turned out, I suppose.
So so I was just curious about like why that choice, because I was like, oh wow, that's a lot of masking.
Yeah, I think I mean this is just lifting the curtain a little bit. In like the very first unhinged, total dribble poured out of my brain draft. Mandy, I think Mandy had a lot bigger of a role as
Mhm.
well. Like a lot of like Kat's past with the Greek life came back to haunt her in a way. So when that was that when that was reworked and sort of like when this book became the final product that you all read, we retained the masking that was necessary to survive sort of like the Greek affiliation, but a lot of like those character beats were cut.
Mhm.
So there were lots of opportunities for major messiness and drama to occur in the plot as the result of X's crossing paths. However, you didn't opt to leverage that to create conflict for the heroines. Can you talk about that choice, or is that more of a predominant dynamic in cishet romances and less so in queer and thus a non-issue?
Are we talking about Sally and her reappearance and her potential dynamic with Andy?
Oh, and Ainsley and
Yeah.
Oh, right. I forgot about Ainsley. Ainsley's a footnote. Ainsley's truly a FWB in my mind. I felt like, yeah, I never really considered Ainsley's role. Poor Ainsley. I should write a short story about Ainsley. Um, uh, Sally, it's interesting. I didn't really think about it in relation to cishet romance per se. I think I wasn't interested in. I wanted to avoid toxicity, like for these characters.
Mhm.
I don't believe all fiction has to be moralistic. I think characters should be messy because humans are messy. But romance, I also feel like has this cardinal rule where like since so much of reading romance can be self-inserty, and so much of it can be like wish fulfillment or fantasy fulfillment. You also can't make your characters like terrible people, you know, like they can't be so toxic to the point where like I'm rooting for these characters to get together because then they won't inflict themselves on like the rest of the world, right? Like that's not the story I wanted to tell. So I don't think I like avoided that conscientiously as like a reaction to cis het romance or anything like that. It was more that it was more a reaction to like being queer, being a lesbian, especially in like a smaller, that's Denver, Boulder's not small, but like maybe a smaller city versus like New York or Chicago or like Tokyo or whatever. You're in like in nerd spaces, especially you're bound to cross paths. um, and I wanted to have that path crossing happen without the messiness of like, will they, won't they get back together, and how does that hurt third party. So yeah, I'm not sure if that was a super satisfying answer to your question. Happy to elaborate further.
Oh no, I mean it answered the question because like, I mean, I have notations where I was like, oh, that's going to get messy. And then I get to another section. I'm like, oh, that didn't end the way I thought it was going to end. Like in the margins, I was like, oh, that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. And then something else would happen. I'd be like, ooh, that's going to be interesting. And then I go a little bit further. I'm like, oh, that didn't happen the way I thought it was going to be. I was like, and then I started wondering, I was like, is this just because like I'm reading this as a cis woman that this is like, or it's like, is it my perspective? And is like, other books I've read that is always the conflict that like some other person gets inserted in and there's a miscommunication because that's so common. And is that why I am just instantly like, ooh, that's going to be a drama. That's going to be a drama. I was just like, but it was just a curious thing because I definitely have the footnotes. I'm like, ooh, that's going to be interesting. That's going to be interesting. And it just never led there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sally is also. I love Sally. I think she's actually one of my favorite characters because she's so flawed and she's so insecure while projecting as like she's kind of like who Kat wants to be, right? Like she's actually deeply insecure, but she projects this like extremely varnished, put together woman. And I wanted to keep her flawed and relatable without like adding that one additional flaw of if she were to like be dating Kat and like still have the hots for Andy or anything like that. I will say that like miscommunication is also, I think it's really challenging to do well. And maybe that's just me, right? Like I oftentimes read books where I'm like, yeah, could have had a conversation on page 5 and then the book would be over. Uh, and I think like that is the most curmudgeonly thing about me when I read or watch romance. Like I watch a lot of Thai dramas because Thailand, God bless Thailand, is like whatever deity you believe in, bless Thailand, is like putting out incredible queer dramas, like boys love and girls love dramas, and like so many of those plots are just like someone said something in episode 1 and it takes until episode 13 for them to be like, I just ran into my ex on my way to get tomatoes. Like I swear nothing happened, and I'm like, you could have. Anyway, so I'll get off my soapbox now. But I find miscommunication really, really challenging to execute well and believably, and make you still root for these. Like if these characters are adults and like communicating, it's hard for me personally to root for them if they're not doing this very basic thing of using their words.
So, this was another thing that we kind of thought was just interesting, and we wanted to understand your thoughts behind it. So, traditionally in romances, villains get a major just desserts in the end, but instead, you gave them a much more real world consequence for their villainy. What led you to that decision?
I think it's realistic.
Yeah, I mean,
I
it was really realistic.
It was.
I mean, it was very realistic.
Yeah, I struggle very much, like truly daily, like on this topic of whether fiction is meant to portray the world as it should be or as the world as it is. And I never know the answer. And I think, you know, we need a little bit of both. Um, but as someone who works in big tech, it's really funny. I was just telling my wife that I realized that my new boss's boss is named Brett. I wrote this book before he got hired. He's fun, for the record. He is a passable individual. But like as I think like I hold myself to a very high standard of believability. Like sometimes I read books set in big tech environments, and I'm like, oh, you've never actually worked in big tech. You don't know what we actually do on a day-to-day basis. And in the same way, like I feel like I could never write a police procedural because I'd be so obsessive about like how I'm getting everything wrong. And that's like a personal like choice, and like truly no shade on people who have like the bravery to write outside of their like domain. But because I work in big tech and because I cared so much about like the feeling of the game studio being, because it's a love letter to gaming. So I wanted like my dream was a game dev to be able to read this book and be like, yeah, this is kind of how, I mean, like hijinks and like, you know, histrionic, cartoonish moments aside, like this is kind of how a game is made. And because of that, I think it really mattered to me that even when the villains don't, you know, crash and burn and like have their Judge Claude Frollo moment and Notre Dame, there are still like joys to be celebrated and happinesses to be reaped. Uh, so, so yeah.
So for this question, kind of a little bit personally what I was wondering as well. Was it difficult to write about the realities of parental expectations with first generation immigrant parents? Because of family dynamics, how important was it for you to include Kat and Andy having very different dynamics with their parents?
A really good question. I don't think it was difficult, but it was extremely intentional. I think that, ooh, how do I address this question? I worry about the flattening of my parents' generation into caricatures. I worry about them being used as the butt of jokes. And I've seen this represented in media, in movies, in books, and TV shows, where you know you've got like the tiger mom, the dragon lady parent, you've got the absent Asian dad, who only says funny stuff, and like Kat's parents kind of fall into that category. And then it's all okay because they have a kumbaya moment where they're like, "Oh, but we love and accept you for who you are." Which, by the way, my parents have never fucking said. Sorry, excuse the cursing. Um, and I worry about that because like it sets up unrealistic expectations. I think I do care a lot about realism. Like you have to find a way to like claim joy, even if your parents never say, "We love and accept you," and like you are enough, and all these validating things, right? Like you have to find a way forward, even if that doesn't happen, even if Hollywood tells us that's how the stories end. Um, and at the same time, I think it does a disservice to the older generation if like they become these flattened caricatures of like these are how Asian parents are, or like these are how Chinese parents are, or these are, you know, whatever, insert ethnicity or you know, group. So I mean, Kat's parents are funny. I mean, they are the source, hopefully, of like of laughter. There's the source of jokes, at least. But for me, it was so intentional that Kat's parents are nothing like Andy's mom. Because I wanted Andy's mom to be that counterpoint of like there are dozens of us. No, there are you know hundreds of thousands of immigrant parents, right? Like probably millions in the U.S. in North America. They are not a monolith. They are not all just like study all the time and like I'm emotionally distant. So that was just, it was so important to me to like not do that disservice to my parents' generation, which is why Andy's mom was like for me a really important character uh, to get right in a multifaceted way.
So, talking about Kat's parents a little bit more, Kat spends the majority of the book anticipating and in dread of Thanksgiving with her family, but we don't end up seeing that on page. So, how did you envision that holiday went?
Terrible. Just in terms of like realism in writing, I imagine that's not fair. I imagine it was extremely stressful for all involved. I imagine that they were delighted to meet Andy. They were truly just very excited that their daughter had started seeing someone like regularly. They probably said some offensive things like, don't fuck this one up. Or like, oh, like, we'll see if you make it to the next one. Like, I'm sure they said somewhat offensive things. I feel like Andy was probably like a pillar of support for Kat during that visit. I'm sure there were cooking mishaps. So yeah, a classic family holiday. Pretty normal, I'd say.
Yeah. Family holidays are so much fun.
Yeah.
So, uh, so this is probably a good place to stop and check in with Megan and see if we have any questions out in the chat about single player before we start talking about more broad topics. Megan, what do we got going on out there?
Yeah, we have a few things. So Zach would like to know, I'm really interested in the sense of place in the story. I love the use of the mountain tattoo to further the story, as well as the dead mall. Do you have Pacific Northwest or Colorado connections that you wanted to explore through the story?
Yes, my very good friends from grad school moved out to Colorado during the pandemic. They were part of like our COVID bubble, and we played Pandemic Legacy together like every week. We would like do dinner parties with them every week, and then they betrayed us, those traitors. They moved out to Erie, Colorado. They bought a big house. They brought their dog and they left us. And I hate them. No, I'm kidding. And we visited them. And I was like, well, I can see why you moved here. You're still dead to me, but thank you for letting me stay in your beautiful home. And that was sort of like the impetus of setting single player in Colorado. I think the other thing is there is a game studio called Deck Nine. They are based in Colorado, and they make they did not found the series, but they inherited the series Life is Strange, which is a gorgeous little almost indie. I can't say it's indie because it's published by Square Enix, but like almost like Twin Peaks vibe, or like Yellow Jackets before Yellow Jackets got scary vibe. Um, Video game about two girls in the Pacific Northwest, and like there's time travel and there's like going back in time to try to save each other's lives. It's a narrative, choices matter, queer-ish video game. And since Deck Nine was the studio that inherited the series, and they're based in Colorado, I just thought it would be nice to pay homage to that studio by setting single player in Colorado.
Nice. And then Jess would like to know, did either Kat or Andy surprise you while you were writing the book by refusing the arc you originally planned?
You know, you know that I think it's the Simpsons meme, which is like that sign can't stop me. Oh, it's not. It's Arthur. It's Arthur. I love that sign can't stop me because I can't read. That's how I feel when I'm writing my books. I don't plot. I don't plot, and therefore the characters tell me where they want to go, and therefore I can't be mad at them for not following my path because I did not have a path set out for them in the first place. So they didn't surprise me. I think the only thing that actually surprised me was like when I first started writing single player. I think I got to chapter 2, and chapter 2 was from Kat's point of view, uh, and I got to chapter 3, and I was like, oh no, I think this is going to be a multi POV book. Originally, it was going to be entirely from Kat's point of view. And I got to chapter 3, and Andy was like, no, 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 you got to tell my side of the story. You can't just tell Kat's side of the story. That's not fair. So I think that was the one thing that like surprised me, where Andy was like, no, I demand a seat at this table.
Donna, are we doing okay on time? Because we have a few more, or I can save them till next break.
Uh, let's do one more and then we'll save the rest for
Okay,
the next stopping point.
perfect. Okay, Zach again. I get so frustrated with how many narratives featuring queer characters are about them coming out or questioning their identities. Was that something you were trying to avoid, or did it just happen? Either
I was
way, thank you.
100%, yes, 100% something I was trying to avoid. This is a me problem. This is not. I again, I totally respect people who resonate with stories of coming out or like identity seeking, and obviously respect the creators who write about that stuff, because it's kind of hard to write about. It's been written, and like of course every story is different, but it's and I won't say it's been overwritten, but it has been written of a lot. But we are more than like, I think queer people and like people of all designations, demographics are more than how they come to their identity. And therefore that was not a story I was interested in telling. I just like flat, like I did not like Kat's family is like, you're gay, cool, find a girlfriend. I was so wildly uninterested in telling that story personally.
Okay, so we will have another check-in in a little bit. So if you have if you have questions come up as we're going along, throw them in the chat.
So, Tara, single player came out of you taking part in NaNoWriMo, correct? How did you get involved with National Novel Writing Month?
It didn't actually come out of NaNoWriMo. Uh, if that's been said previously, then that was totally my brain part. Um, I got back into writing because of NaNoWriMo.
Okay.
So I got married in 2019, and pretty much the next day, my wife was like, hey, you're one of those people who say they want to write a novel but never really do it. Is that the kind of person you want to be? And I was like, ouch, that really hurt me to the marrow of my bones, because I don't want to be the person who's like, yeah, I might write a novel one day, and never actually does it. And we got married in September, so that was 1 month away from NaNoWriMo. So in November of 2019 is when I picked the pen back up in earnest. But I wrote a couple other books, not romances actually, and they haven't seen the light of publishing's day before single player. And then single player I started in 2022. I probably still like adhered to the like X words per day, like whatever inhumane number of words per day goal, but it wasn't specifically part of that challenge.
Okay. Um, so you've always kind of aspired to be an author. So what drew you to wanting to write a romance instead of continuing after literary fiction?
I don't know. Life is surprising sometimes. I think it was truly just like literary fiction feels so heavy. There's no lightness to literary fiction, which is why I want to meet Toni Morrison because she writes with a lightness that I just cannot comprehend. Uh, but like literary fiction feels like getting into your sumo wrestler costume and like strapping in and like wrestling. For me, like I'm sure for others it comes easier. And there was such a lightness to writing Kat and Andy into being. It was just like they were there. They were just waiting to have their story be told, as like totally cheesy as that sounds. And there was just like an ease that I actually have not accessed since. to their story pouring out of my brain. So yeah, I mean, all my friends, all my like non-writing friends are like, romance, you?
Mhm.
That's weird. I'm not like I'm more Andy than Kat. I'm not a super like romantic person. Um, yeah, I don't know. Life takes us weird places sometimes.
Well, it took you somewhere really wonderful, so we appreciate it.
Staying on the writing aspect, have you discovered that you are more inclined to be a pantser or a plotter?
Yeah, total pantser. I mean, at this point, I'm wondering if it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where I'm like, every single time I plot, I get like bored of my own plot, and then I'm like, well, this I already know what happens, so like nobody else cares what happens. Um, I don't. It might be self-fulfilling prophecy at this point, and I should like try and fight against it. But I'm a total pantser, and I'm not sure if I'm a pantser because I'm lazy. Because like I just can't be bothered. I also think like in writing communities, there's this like whole ethos around like, oh, how many words did you write per day, right? But like writing is so much more than getting words down on the page. It's like sometimes going for a walk and like thinking and like doing like freehand exercises that like just brainstorm your character's favorite color. But none of that counts towards your like, I wrote 600 words today and therefore was productive by this totally arbitrary standard. Um, uh, so despite me sort of like my rational brain knowing that, my lizard brain is still like, well, that doesn't count as writing. So uh, it's best for me to be a pantser so I don't have to do any of that thinking.
So this gets into kind of the gaming aspect of things. As a gamer, how did you decide what you were going to explain as background for readers who might not have a background in gaming and what was okay to leave out?
I think it depends a lot on genre. Like, I think literary fiction, for example, since we were just talking about it, there is more of this like expectation that the reader go and do their homework and like go and look a thing up and like if the reader doesn't and it's a little obscure, it's like, yeah, it's literary fiction, nobody knows what it's about anyway. I'm being derogatory, I don't obviously mean that. But like romance is not to it's like it's not meant to be an obscure genre. Right? So like for me it was like I definitely erred on the side of over explaining. And then even when I did over explain, my agent who is not a gamer and my editor who is not a gamer was like, yeah, you're gonna have to write this one out. Or you're gonna have to like find a clever way to explain it. So definitely erred on the side of explaining all the various alphabet soup acronyms within the gaming space. I also think gaming has gone like reasonably mainstreamish. Like there are so many words I think people don't realize they use that are from gaming culture, like noob or tanking or yeah, this is a Chinese culture thing, but they use this word kill line, which is like from Overwatch. But like or like even like winning, right? A lot of our slang is from gaming culture. So yeah, I don't know. Erred on the side of explaining. I also knew that like the subject matter could put people off. Like I definitely, Instagram is a terrible place to be sometimes. Like I definitely see comments being like, I can't read this book. I'm not a gamer. And like I'm like, oh god. But also like if they took that leap of faith and picked it up anyway, the last thing I want to do is gatekeep the book from someone who has taken that leap of faith. I want to make it as accessible and welcoming to everyone who has decided to take that leap of faith. So,
So we have a couple of questions about gaming for you as well. First being, do you have a favorite video game?
like choosing a favorite book. Oof. Mass Effect is mentioned in the text of single player. Gosh, that book, that video game is so good. Um, it was produced by a studio called BioWare, which was then acquired by EA Electronic Arts, which is the real world equivalent for Elevation Arts, which is the publisher in single player. Electronic Arts really just makes like FIFA, like soccer games and like shooters, and like ran BioWare into the ground. So Mass Effect probably is one of my favorite video games of all time. Just like such good writing, such reasonably good queer representation for the 2010s. Wonderful voice acting, incredible world building, just so, and the music is, anyway, I could wax poet, and that's probably one of the ones at the top of my list.
So, are there any particular video games that you feel have the best romance plots and tropes?
So Mass Effect is up there for me, but like if you view it from like a 2010 lens, otherwise like you're like the commanding officer of a ship and you're like going around and sleeping with all of your coworkers in intergalactic space, like definitely problematic. Um, I think I think games like books and like all sorts of media are getting better and better at representing, the spectrum of romantic proclivities and sexualities and relationships from toxic to like very healthy. Baldur's Gate 3 is probably the game that most recently came out where I'm like, oh, they did a really, really good job. Like they even hired intimacy coordinators for the motion capture artists, which is like pretty much unheard of. And like in video games again, like it's usually the thing where like you give someone enough gifts and like love falls out of them, like they're a vending machine. And I think Baldur's Gate did like an incredible thing that I've never seen before in video games, where it's like some characters you actually have to not push them. You have to let them make their own decision. You have to not choose the dialogue option where you're flirting with them, and like you have to like actually be human, sort of, human, air quotes, for them to like if you're too pushy, if you flirt with them every chance you get, they're going to like not like you back, which I thought was like a pretty bold game dev decision, because like normally in games you're like, oh, I have the flirt option, yeah, I'm gonna take it, this is how I indicate to the machine that I am interested in you, machine.
So this is a how did you get into gaming? And this is actually something I'm interested in because I do have kids who game as well. Do you find the gaming world can be competitive and toxic, like for example through Discord, especially to individuals who aren't cishet males?
Oh, I think it's competitive and toxic, especially for cishet men. I actually think it's better to be a queer gamer because you just like exist on a weird corner of the internet, where you're like, oh, the cishet men are playing, I don't know, Counter Strike again. That again, that's reductive. Everyone plays everything these days. Um, yes, I think I think gaming is such an interesting hobby because so much of the community is online. Like I personally don't know anyone who, like, my wife games, but we play a completely disjoint set of games. Like she plays, you know, farming sims, and I play like shooter type story heavy games or like roguelikes. Which means like the I don't actually have a lot of gaming friends, and like the way I find community is online. I find it on Reddit and in other forums like that, and that's really hard, right? Because like on the internet, everyone's flattened into like their comments. So like this is where internet literacy, media literacy, having that sort of like innate empathy of like some people just leave a comment to tell you how much they hated a thing, and like that's their prerogative, and that's not the type of person I am, but it's okay for them to be that type of person, and like remembering that like for every four negative things we need one positive thing to like uh sorry, the reverse. For like every one negative thing, we need like four positive things for us to feel neutral about like our day, right? Um, but those like to me all feel like human problems, and like not they're not an indictment on the art itself. And the art by itself is still like can still be like extremely beautiful. Like if you look at games like The Last of Us, which got made into an HBO series, like season 2 was controversial, but like season 1, what an incredible story, right? And like I thought the TV show was good, but I truly believe that is a story that could only be told through like with its like in its most like powerful form, in its like final form, through gaming as a medium.
So, I'm going to try to ask this correctly. What is your tabletop gaming character when you play? Can you tell us about them? And also, did you find that your experiences developing characters and storylines for games helped you as you were developing characters and plot arcs for the book?
Yes. So I play in a couple of TTRPG tables right now. I am a dungeon master for a campaign that's been running for like 3.5 years now, which is nothing short of a miracle. And as the dungeon master, I play all the characters. And then I'm in another campaign where I'm a player. My writing friend is the dungeon master, the game master. And in that campaign, I am a cleric uh, who I have a lot of feelings about death, and uh, oh, like uh, the void beyond the veil, so to speak. So my character is this individual who's um, gosh, I don't even know why I'm sharing this. My character is this individual whose mother died of starvation, and then she herself, the character, also died. But then she realized that the afterlife is just an eternity of you alone with your thoughts and nothing else. Like no gods, no heaven, no hell, no sort of like haptic feedback, no physicality, just you and your thoughts for eternity. And then she was brought back to life. And then she was like, hell no, I'm not going back there. That was awful. So she is fundamentally a very cowardly cleric. And she runs away at every opportunity because she is so afraid of dying again. Really dark character, really challenging for my DM to dungeon master. Would not recommend, if any of you are thinking about playing a TTRPG, would not recommend that being your starter character. Definitely only play a character like that if you have a great amount of trust with your table and with your dungeon master. But to answer your probably more important question, yes, very helpful. As a tool for writing, even for little things like as a dungeon master, I oftentimes like narrate, like you walk into a dark wood, there's a sliver of moon hanging low in the sky, and you hear a rustling in the trees to your left. Like being able to just like pull that off the top of my dome whenever I'm stuck in my writing, I'm like, okay, well, if I were a dungeon master, how would I narrate this scene? And that like sometimes helps me get unstuck.
Yeah. I was like, I just want to make sure I phrase that right because I was like, that's the real, like, I definitely was curious about the character building you do, but then also I was like, you build a lot of stories. If I understand what you're doing as a dungeon master, you build the story. So I was like, how does that work with like then being an author? That seems like it would have a lot of parallels. So
Yeah, and, not to be pedantic, I think dungeon masters um, create the world. They don't create the story. The
okay,
story is collaborative, and like such a nuance, but also so deeply important, right? God, you're really getting me on my nerd soapbox, but like Matt Mercer is like just this wonderful.
sorry. That's why I was like,
No, no,
I'm
no.
not going to say this right.
No. Sorry, soapbox not in the sense that like I'm just so passionate about it that I
Yeah.
could talk about it for years. Not in that you got anything
Yeah, okay.
wrong because you absolutely didn't. Um, but anyway, this dungeon master I'm like extremely passionate about was like he dungeon master so that his friends can be the heroes that they are in real life, right? Like they can be the heroes in like their stories that he knows them to be in real life, and like that like for me, like I'm like, yes, that's what a dungeon master should do. They create the world, they create the pantheon, they create the currency system, they create like consequences to the player's actions. Like you walk into a bar and you punch a random orc in the nose for no reason, there are consequences to your actions. So the DM reacts the world to the player's actions, but the story is told collaboratively.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a son who's going to a sleepover, but they're going to start at 3 o'clock so they can continue on a campaign this weekend. So that's, I know that.
Everyone should play TTRPGs. They're great for strategy, planning,
Yeah.
socialization, math.
Yeah, both
acting,
mine.
improv. It's so good.
They are. They're great. I mean, my kids are theater kids, so they both do love Dungeon. They love Dungeons and Dragons. So this is the. Have you had the opportunity to go to a con or a cosplay?
Oh gosh, where do I start? Yes, yes. The answer is yes. Yeah, I go to cons pretty much every year. I the older I get, the harder it is for me to cosplay. It's just hard to find time and energy to like sit down on a Saturday after you've cleaned your bathroom and walked your dog to be like, now I'm gonna sew a bustle. Like it's really hard for me to get into that headspace. But I do love I like nerds exist online. I just talked about how I don't really have a gaming community in person, except for the people I play TTRPGs with. And like cons are like the one time in out of the year and like the one physical location where they can all be and be like, oh, we exist in the world.
So, two-part question because we love to build out our TBRs. Do you have a book that you love that you think people should all have on their TBRs if they haven't read it yet? And do you have anything currently on your TBR that you're really excited about reading?
A Lady for All Seasons is so good. It's just mind-blowingly good. The single player just got nominated for a Lambda Award last for this past year, and my competition is T.J. Alexander's A Gentleman's Gentleman, and I'm like, I'm not gonna win, and I shouldn't win because A Gentleman's Gentleman is so good. So both of those Regency romances, A Gentleman's Gentleman and A Lady for All Seasons, is just like wonderful books. Gideon the Ninth, such a easy answer. Everyone should read Gideon the Ninth. Uh, Everyone should read Harrow the Ninth. And even if you don't want to, you should finish it anyway. Um, the Trader Borrow Cormorant, I paid lip service to that book. It was the book in Andy's bathroom. I love that book so much. It's Seth Dickinson. What a mind on that individual. Yeah, what's on my TBR? One day everyone will have been against this, I think, is on my TBR. A very sobering nonfiction book. Kristen Hanna's The Women, I think, is on my TBR. Um, yeah, I'm in a weird time of life. Because like the project I'm working on is like almost speculative lit fic. It means I'm reading a lot of dark lit fic. I just finished Lincoln in the Bardo, which was like maybe a couple months ago, which was like by George Saunders, which was like a wild ride, which is about little Willie Lincoln, which is Abraham Lincoln's son, and how he passed away, and like the effect it had on Abraham Lincoln as the Civil War was raging outside the White House. So very interesting book.
Before I ask the last question, I just didn't know if you did you know that they announced that T. Kingfisher will be writing an Astorian prequel.
Oh, I didn't. I didn't. Oh no, I did. I saw that on the Baldur's Gate. Yes, Reddit
Yes,
board. Yes, I did see that. I did not realize it was Kingfisher, but
yeah.
I did
For
see that was.
everybody else that's like related to Baldur's Gate game, that's a prequel, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Yeah. I don't. There are so many books. Hard to keep track.
So this is probably the most important question of the night. Is there anything you want fans to know about events you might be going to, things you are working on, basically anything that you are excited about that you want readers to be excited about?
I'm a reclusive author who only appears on Zoom when the moon is full in the sky. And, no major news from me other than time is ever scarce and words take unfortunately or fortunately time to crank out. Um, I'm just so grateful for readers who have picked it up. I'm so grateful for readers who have given single player a chance, and thank you. And yeah, I urge you to continue to read outside your comfort zone, whatever that might look like.
Okay. So we're going to move back to a couple of fun questions to wrap up the evening. But before we do that, we're going to go back to Megan to go to the chat and see what's out there.
Yes, I think we have another three or four, so
Okay.
get through those. Sasha says the cover art aesthetic was very cool. Kat describes herself as plus size. Do you feel like that was reflected in the cover art?
I think she could have been a little more plus size if I'm being if I'm being brutally honest. But publishing is kind of like a weird thing where you like the authors don't have a lot of control over things, and I'm also like a fundamentally, the most cat-like thing about me is I'm a people pleaser. So when the artist is like, "Is this better?" I'm like, yes, it's
Yeah.
better. We're done. Like I'm not gonna I'm not gonna go 3 more rounds with you with the same feedback. But freaking I love the cover. Mallory Hayer is the cover artist. Just super super talented. I love almost every cover she's done. And she's done a whole bunch for romance and sort of like women's fic in general.
Jess would like to know what kind of readers have reached out to you about single player in ways that surprise you the most.
I think I'm always like really gratified by people who aren't gamers because like I wrote it as a love letter to gamers, and so like I'm almost relieved when a gamer enjoys it. Um, but like it's most surprising when a non-gamer reaches out and is like, "Hey, this book really resonated with me," and I'm like, "Oh, what do you play?" And they're like, "Nothing," and I'm like, "Wow, that's so cool! Thank you so much," and like, thank you for finding something. Uh, because like I think we live in a society where like we we almost over index on like the people we belong to and like the hobbies we have and like the identities we cleave to, and that's great. Like I don't want to denigrate that, but it can almost come at the detriment of like being able to try new things. So I'm always so grateful for those readers who are like, I'm not a gamer and I really love this.
Robbie would like to know how the book has been received within the gaming community.
Yeah, good segue. Pretty well, I think. Like I didn't put up like a Reddit post on our gamers being like, "How did you guys like this book?" I think the one feather in my cap that I will share is I had an event in LA with a pretty popular voice actor named Erica E. They're on Dimension 20, and they were recently nominated for a BAFTA for their work in the game Ghost of Yotei. They are queer, they are Asian American. They play Dungeons and Dragons live stream to like millions of millions and millions of viewers around the world. Anyway, I was very lucky to do an event with them. And they like one of the questions they asked me, they were like, "Have you worked in gaming?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, "This is pretty freaking accurate." And I was like, "Oh my god, thank God." Because it was just like so like you can't write a love letter to an industry and then get like fundamental things about that industry wrong. I was extremely relieved and delighted when they said that.
And then I think the last question. Jess would like to know what was your favorite cosplay outfit you've done?
Hmm. I did shave the size of my head for an undercut for Bo Lionett, which is a Critical Role character. Critical Role is like an extremely famous, if you're a total dweeb, extremely famous Dungeons and Dragons live stream. So that was fun, mostly because I got away with it, because my parents didn't see me for like a year during the pandemic, and therefore they were not able to chastise me for my undercut. But my favorite was probably there was a TV show called The Legend of Korra. It was a spin-off or a sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender. And spoilers, I guess, Korra's gay or bi, rather, to be very specific. And she ends up with it's an enemies to lovers plot line over 4 seasons. So, slow burn, my favorite thing. Um, And she ends up with her co-conspirator Asami. And so I cosplayed as Korra, the Avatar and the Waterbender, and my wife cosplayed as Asami, and that was probably my favorite cosplay.
That's so fun. And then, just so they don't get missed, just a couple comments. So, Jess says she thinks what's great about romance is that you can explore different spaces and passions like gaming that maybe you don't have, like personally. So, she appreciates you bringing your experiences and love for something she doesn't participate in so she can appreciate a new perspective. And Robbie says he's not a gamer and he really loved this book. So,
Thank you.
just wanted to make sure we got those all in there. And
And
that's
I
all we have, Donna.
Yeah. And just like to add to those comments that because I have kids that are gamers, it's actually nice sometimes to see written out that way because it's fun to see maybe insights that maybe I don't know.
That's awesome. If your kids read it and they're like, they got this terminology totally wrong, please don't tell me.
I enjoyed it, having no exposure to gaming at all, but coming from big IT, so greatly. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Thank you.
Um, all right. So these last questions are what we call rapid fire, and they are just what they sound like, quick round robin style. Whatever pops in your head, just say it, and we move to the next one. So with that, favorite liquid fuel while riding?
Water.
If you could only have one streaming service, which one would you choose?
YouTube Music.
Yes or no, pineapple and pizza?
Okay, no, but my wife really likes it, so yes.
Are you an early bird or night owl?
Night Owl.
Paper, or audio?
Paper.
Best escape, winter mountain getaway or warm island hideaway?
Ooh, Winter Mountain Getaway.
Grumpy or sunshine makes the best heroine?
Grumpy.
Speed reader or pouring over every line?
Oh, pouring over every line. 100%.
And with that, you've survived rapid fire and author's chat, Tara. So,
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope I didn't ramble on too long. I know it's super late for some of
oh,
y'all. So.
well, hopefully we didn't ramble on too long and keep you up too late. But thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for joining us as well. We've had just so much fun chatting with you this evening and spending April's reading single player. I was bad and forgot to hold it up earlier. Um, so thank you, everyone. Just a couple of quick announcements before we close out tonight. Our May book is going to be When the Tides Held the Moon by Vanessa Veda Kelly. We're going to be having Vanessa with us on the 18th of May. Next week, we're going to be discussing up through chapter 18. The rest of the schedule is going to be published later this week and posted online. So good night to everyone. And the recording for tonight will be up either tonight or tomorrow. So look for that link. Thanks, everyone, and have
Thank
a great one.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.